Well, hi everyone. Warm welcome to you. Welcome to Future Work Scotland, and we're back just like that. So, just wanted to wish everyone a happy new year and all the very best wishes for the year ahead from the Future Work Scotland team. We're thrilled to be back. It's great to be kicking off the year with another session, and as you'll see later, we've already got a few other exciting things lined up for you as we build up our programme for 2025. Wow, 2025. Just the usual formalities. I'm Sathpal Singh. For those of you joining us the first time, many familiar faces on tonight. But of course, me Sath. I'm your host for this session, and I'm joined by my co-host and co-organizer Donald Henderson. And we have a very simple code of conduct. We simply ask that you be respectful for one another. We want everyone to have a wonderful experience. That's as complicated as it gets. So we keep it very simple here, and we'll do a few shout outs at the end. A few things just to share with the community on this session. So we'll come back to that towards the end. And with that, I'm thrilled to welcome our guest speaker, kicking off the year with us for January, Alison Coward. It's been great to be working with Alison for the last wee while. If you don't know Alison founded Bracket Consultancy, and through which she does great work, really supporting progressive organisations to continue on their journey to become, very collaborative organisations that are really driving through great sort of modern practices and helping them with great high-performing teams and high-performance cultures, which is something many in this community are very interested in. So we're thrilled to have Alison here. She's worked with some incredible clients, including Google and Meta, amongst others. So that's great to see. Fantastic. And of course, Alison's authored the Workshop Culture book, which is really what brings us here. And the session Donald's holding up for you if you're not familiar with the book. And it's a great read. We've both been reading it, and we're thrilled to be have Alison along to talk us through some of the core ideas and themes of what workshop culture is all about. I'm going to hand over to Alison in a second. Before I do that, just to explain, we're going to have a slightly different format this evening. For those of you who've been with us before, and many of you have. So I'm going to hand over to Alison. Alison's going to do a bit of an introduction, explain a little bit more about, what workshop culture is about, do a bit of seed setting, really context setting. And then in the middle segment, Alison and I are going to have a little bit of a fireside chat. We will delve a little bit more into a little bit more detail and some of the topics. None of this is rehearsed, so we'll see how we go. I'm sure it'll be lots of fun. And then in the last segment of the session, we'll open up to your good selves for our usual typical question and answer session. If you do come up with any questions as you hear us chatting away or as Alison does the intro, please drop them into the chat so we can find them, prefix them with a Q that helps us. And then later on, we'll also open up for anybody who wants to come off mute and share their question verbally. So that's the plan. That's what we're hoping to do. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Alison so we can get started. So Alison, over to you. Welcome to Future Work Scotland.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you for having me. Really pleased. It's been a kind of long time coming, getting this organised. We have been trying to organise it for a while, and it just turned out that the beginning of the year felt like a good time to kick off. So really pleased to be here. So I'm going to be talking about my book, Workshop Culture: A Guide to Building Teams That Thrive. This is the book here. If you haven't seen it, Donald was very kindly holding it up. This is it as well. I'm also happy at any point throughout this session or afterwards, if there's anything that particularly resonates with you, please share it on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm really happy to hear thoughts and stuff, and tag me in your posts and stuff. So that's my QR code to connect with me on LinkedIn, or I'm just Alison Coward. LinkedIn here. So as Sathpal said, I'm going to be just talking through for about sort of 20 minutes or so, maybe a little bit less, just through some of the core concepts in workshop culture, and some of the kind of the main touch points and the main underpinnings of it. And then in our chat, our fireside chat afterwards, Sathpal and I will get into the kind of nuts and bolts and some more detailed questions. So really, the whole principle and the whole question that I'm answering behind this idea of workshop culture is this: how can we use workshops and facilitation to transform the world of work? And it really drives me, actually. I'm a massive advocate of collaboration, but through the work that I've been doing, I've been running Bracket for the last 15 years. And I'm very, as I say, very passionate about collaboration, but I do see that as people and as organizations, we struggle with it. We've been talking about collaboration for a long time. Like, collaboration is nothing new. We've been talking about it probably since the beginning of time, but yet somehow we aren't getting it right. And, you know, I probably don't need to tell anybody this. We cannot, when we work in knowledge organizations or the knowledge economy, we literally cannot get our work done without collaborating. It's absolutely essential for our modern organisations today. We can't get through our day without collaborating. And actually, it's really essential for preparing for the future. This stat from Asana, an Asana report stated that 79% of workers at collaborative organisations feel well prepared to adapt to emergent business challenges. So it's not just about getting through our day to day and collaborating. It's about how well we set up to deal with future business challenges and opportunities. And those who feel that they work in collaborative organisations are much more well prepared to do that. At the same time, 2023, LinkedIn, one of their reports, cited teamwork as one of the top 10 most in-demand skills. So, you know, probably again, I'm in good company here. I kind of don't need to talk to you about this. We all know collaboration is important. It's kind of integral to the work that we do. Yet we're struggling. And this stat from Zippia report 2023 said that 86% of leaders blame lack of collaboration as a main reason for workplace failure. And there's also a stat that I talk about in the book that comes from Harvard Business Review. 75% of cross-functional teams are dysfunctional. So there's a real gap between our need to collaborate in order to get through our days and in order for business survival and our ability to do it in practice. There's and that gap, I see that gap getting ever wider. And so I've been sort of, you know, looking for what the solution is. And that's where I came across the idea of workshop culture. At the same time, we have got lots of tools that supposedly are meant to help us collaborate. But actually, a report from Harvard Business Review 2021 actually shows that they actually hinder us in our day-to-day as well. And this article titled showed that the very tools that are meant to really support us in collaboration are actually getting in the way of us. They're not helping at all. So again, we're still not getting something right. Pointing to one of the challenges, but also one of the opportunities that I see, meetings. Again, I think we're probably all in good company here where we will probably be able to recognise that a lot of the meetings that we attend with our teams within our organisations aren't working, and yet they're a massive opportunity. They are sort of one of the things that we all do. It's one of the structures whereby our teams come together and we can, it's almost like a snapshot or a display of our team culture. And if they're not working, we've got an opportunity to fix those and make them more collaborative, which will have an impact. These are some of the challenges that I see, some of the challenges that I hear with our teams. Too many meetings, just there's too many of them. And the meetings that they do have, they're unproductive. There's an imbalance in contributions. Some people are dominating the conversation and some people are kind of passive and not getting involved. They're flat, they're not interactive, they're not interesting, and you don't really get the results that you need to from these meetings. And these are sort of our typical meetings. But really, this is the opportunity. If we do run our meetings more effectively, we can use them to connect better as a team, and we can use them to enhance collaboration. We can use them to learn from each other and make real progress in the work that we do, and create value together. And I really do believe this phrase, you know, as I mentioned, our meetings, I would say that our meetings, if we observe our meetings, we can get a sense of our team culture because we can look at how people are interacting with each other, how people are engaging with the material, how people feel after they leave their meetings. That's also an indication about how they feel about their work. So the other way around is if we do start to fix our meetings and make them more collaborative, make them more of a reflection of how we want to be working, then we can also change our culture. So change your meetings, change your culture. And this is what brings me on to the connection between great workshops and great teams. As I mentioned, I've been running Bracket for a while, probably facilitating it a lot longer than that. But what I started to see was that in the workshops that I facilitated, even for a short period of time, whether it was 1 hour, whether it was a day, teams were collaborating. they were getting all those things that we need to get in our day to day. So it's possible. It is achievable as teams. And so I started to think, what is it that we can learn from how teams are working together in a workshop environment when they're well facilitated, well designed, and the environment is there? What can we learn from that to take it into our culture? This is what we get from great workshops. So when I work with clients and they want a facilitator, they want someone to come in and facilitate sessions or team coaching sessions or support them in developing facilitation skills, these are the things that they're looking for. They want their team to be collaborative. They want their team to be generating new ideas. They want to make sure that everybody is speaking up. You hear from everybody. And because they're finding in their own meetings that's not happening. And at the same time, we want that kind of sense of collaboration and creativity, but we also need to produce results. We want to get great content, high quality content. We want teams to feel aligned and feel clear on their goals. And we want to use those workshops to get a sense of progress and momentum and energy. The experience for the participants on the other side, when they're involved in a workshop, I mean, they don't really know, if you facilitated workshops before, they kind of don't really know, they're not aware of the process that a facilitator is designed, but what they feel is they feel really engaged. They are there and they're focusing on the work and they're really connected to the work, they're connected to each other. I just ran a workshop last week, in fact, and I was with a team for a day, and this is a comment that I get frequently. But in that workshop, one of the managers came up to me afterwards and said, you know, in that day, you've got our team to open up with each other more than we ever have before. And so there's something about that workshop format which enables people to connect together and build that connection. A book that I refer to quite a lot is Daniel Pink's Drive. His book Drive is a look at how workers in the knowledge economy are motivated at work, and he has these principles: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy, people feel that they have control over the work that they do and how they get that work done. Mastery, they feel challenged just to the right level. It's not too easy, it's not too hard. They are just being challenged enough to move forward. And purpose, they're clear on why they're there and what they're doing. And you get all of these things in a workshop. As a facilitator, you know, I'm not there to contribute content or tell people what to do. They are the experts in their area or in the work that they do as a team. So I'm just there to provide the container for them to have those productive conversations. They know how to get their work done. So I'm providing that autonomy. There is an element of challenge, you know, it's not meant to be easy and smooth. There is meant to be some tension there. And everybody knows why they're there in the room together as well. And with that, we get that sense of progress. We're moving forward. We know that a workshop is a tool to help us get to the next stage. It's about creating content that we will then turn into actions or a plan or commitments. And then this is what's interesting for me. This is what I started to observe the more I was doing workshops and the more I kind of had the opportunity to work with teams over a period of time. So when, you know, you might get this in a one-off workshop, but when I was seeing teams, when I was working with teams over a period of time and running kind of a series of workshops, it was starting to have an impact on how they were interacting between the workshops. So the ability for that session to help them open up and connect more meant that they were opening up and communicating more in between the sessions in their day-to-day. They were building more trust with each other. And some of the tools that we use in the workshop, such as design thinking and creative ideation, they're able to then take that into their daily work and use that to generate new ideas and to innovate. The other challenge that I saw, or the challenge that I saw sort of after facilitating lots of workshops was, it was great. I was getting the team collaborating and communicating in that session. But as a facilitator that was external, I was getting to the end of the workshop and I was feeling good about the day that we'd had and the content that the team had generated together, but also feeling a little bit sad knowing that we'd had this great day, lots of post-it notes, flip charts, the team had relaxed, and they'd perhaps go back to their desks the next day and be bombarded with their kind of task list and go back to business as usual, almost forget the feeling that we had at the end of the workshop or during that workshop. So this was another question I started to ask myself. How do we continue to have impact after a workshop has ended? How do we continue that feeling that we have, that feeling where everyone feels kind of really joyful, really energized, feel like they've got a lot of work done together, feel like they've connected with each other? We kind of need that in our everyday. So how do we continue that after a workshop is ended? And this is where I coined the term workshop culture, after having seen, being able to work with teams over a period of time and seeing how the workshop was not just about the time together that I was facilitating, but what happened in between the sessions that I ran for teams, and how we could again continue that feeling on. So this is the strap line behind the book, Workshop Culture. What if every day felt like your team's most productive away day? How can we take that feeling of that productivity, that creativity, that focus, and that connection, and make it part of our everyday? And I think I want to kind of clear something up. A workshop culture isn't about running workshops day in, day out, because we can't do that. It would be exhausting. A workshop culture is about taking some of the principles and some of the things that a facilitator does into our day-to-day so we can get that impact. So this is my definition of a workshop culture: a team culture that uses the principles and practices of workshops and facilitation to encourage creativity and productivity and to build the environment for effective collaboration. So as I said, it's not about running workshops all the time, but it is about taking influence from what a facilitator does to design and facilitate that workshop, but also how the participants of that workshop, of which workshops interact with each other, and taking that into our day-to-day culture. So I just want to share some of the four foundations of a workshop culture. This is kind of, a shift towards the mindset. What does a workshop culture look like? What does it feel like? What are the main elements of it? What are we trying to work towards? So the first is kind of what I've covered already. A workshop is more than a one-off event. Yes, those events are valuable and useful, and we do need to do them. We do need focused time away from the day-to-day for teams to get together and have deep, focused discussions about topics, whether it's their culture, whether it's about strategy, whether it's ideation. We also need to look at workshops as a tool. The workshop is not the thing in itself. The workshop is a tool to help a team achieve something. There's a before the workshop, which is the design, the preparation for, and also the context that the team sits within. There's what happens during the workshop, and then there's what happens afterwards. So what we're doing with the workshop culture, in a workshop, you have kind of the boundaries of the time, start and end of the session. You've got the boundaries of the space that you go to. Often we run workshops in different spaces to our offices to kind of get that different feeling, that different energy. With a workshop culture, we're kind of breaking down those boundaries, and we're bringing that into our day-to-day. Constantly balance creativity and productivity. I think balancing creativity and productivity is, again, one of the challenges that I see a lot in teams. I think in the work that we do today, we definitely have a bias towards productivity. It's very much about getting things done. But in order to innovate and in order to be a successful team or a successful organisation, we also need that element of creativity, which can feel quite alien and quite uncomfortable to certain environments, certain types of organisations. Often we kind of try to put the creative element, the creativity element in the box of a workshop, because creativity is messy and it feels kind of safer to put it in the constraints of a specific time and a specific place away from our day-to-day. But actually what you get in a workshop, what the facilitator is doing, is constantly moving between these states of creativity and productivity. A workshop isn't just about coming up with ideas. It also needs to be translated into something, into action, to be useful. So you see a facilitator move intentionally between divergent thinking exercises and convergent thinking exercises. Divergent, brainstorming, ideas generation, and convergent, where we're kind of making decisions and we're prioritizing. And we kind of need to bring an element of that into our day-to-day. We need to not be scared of the kind of non-linear nature of creativity, and understand that creativity and productivity, even though they feel like they're at odds with each other, they're actually two sides of the same coin. We need both. We need creativity to develop ideas. We need productivity to put them into the action. Too far along the scale of either, then we don't really get that. We don't really harness the kind of the talents and the interactions of the team. So constantly balance creativity and productivity. Third principle, tiny tweaks, not sweeping changes. We are not trying to change everything overnight with a workshop culture. Actually, we know that sustainable change is achieved by making small steps consistently over a period of time. So what we're doing is we're kind of shifting, gradually shifting behaviour over a longer period of time, rather than trying to make these big, instant, immediate changes. We want to make these sustainable changes. We're trying to find the actions that are kind of particularly initially low effort but high impact, so we can start to build that momentum. And as we get that trust and that momentum, and sort of, teams start to settle in to new ways of working, then we can bring in more changes. And the final principle is that a workshop culture is designed. And this is what we do with a workshop, right? A facilitator. A workshop, as we know, is not just what happens on the day. The facilitator has done a lot of work beforehand to get the process right. And the facilitator is thinking about what the team need to discuss, the context of the team, who's in the team, what kinds of interactions might happen, what the team need to discuss. And they're creating an overall structure to account for all of that. They're thinking about the dynamics that might come up, and they're using exercises and processes and tools to counteract perhaps some of the negative dynamics that might occur, but also to enhance some of the positive dynamics. We need to do the same with a workshop culture. A workshop culture doesn't happen, any team culture, in fact, doesn't happen by default. We need to be intentional. We need to think, what is it that we need to achieve as a team? Who is on the team? What's happening around us? And we design our systems and our processes and our routines and our rituals as a team to make sure that we achieve the goals that we have set out for ourselves. So workshop culture is more than a one-off event. Balancing creativity and productivity, tiny tweaks, not sweeping changes, and a workshop culture is designed. So those are the kind of four main principles. And then the last bit of this talk before we go into the fireside is I just want to share the framework. This framework forms a massive part of the book, and it's a framework that I've developed over the years that I've been working in Bracket, both through research and through practice. These 5 pillars are the 5 pillars that I have identified that high-performing teams contain or bear in mind. And this is not a step-by-step journey. It's not a checklist. It's a need to have an awareness of these 5 elements. And perhaps when you're facing challenges, being able to identify which of these elements is the challenge and which you need to fix, and then being able to zoom in and use the relevant tools to fix it. The other thing about this 5-pillar framework is that all of those things, alignment, cohesion, communication, design, and change, they are developed through workshop-like conversations. So underpinning all of this is the need to involve a team in these conversations for alignment, cohesion, communication, design, and change. Again, they don't happen by themselves. It's not just a leader's responsibility. The whole act of this is involving teams in this overall discussion so that you work towards that workshop culture. So I'll just quickly run through those pillars in turn, just describe them. So alignment makes sense. It's, are we all pointing in the same direction? Are we all clear on our team purpose? Do we know what success looks like for our team? And if relevant, if appropriate, have we created working principles that we are all going to stay accountable to? And the way to kind of discuss alignment is to make sure that regularly your team has opportunities to take a step back and look at the big picture. One of the things I mentioned earlier on in the talk is that we are overwhelmed. We have got a lot of tasks to do. We've got a lot to get through on a day-to-day basis. And we also need to remember that the individual tasks that we need to do on a daily basis also need to feed up into the vision of the team and what the team is trying to achieve. So every now and again, we need to kind of take a step back, pause, and just check in and make sure that we're all aligned and pointing in the right direction. Another part of this, going back to Daniel Pink's drive, is just this need for team purpose. individuals in the knowledge economy are much more motivated by their work when they can see the bigger picture, when they can see what their work, the reason why they're doing the work that they're doing. They are kind of invested, involved, even involved in creating the mission, the vision, the purpose of the team. So having those kind of workshop type conversations where you're checking in on alignment, perhaps even co-creating those elements of alignment together is key. The second pillar is cohesion. And cohesion is really two elements. The first element is, how do the individuals in the team connect to the bigger purpose of the team? So is everybody on the team aware of how their contribution individually is vital and important to achieving the team vision? So that's one piece. The second piece is how well those team members connect to each other in that sense, the typical team cohesion. And the way to do this is to build in time for reflection. First of all, each individual on the team is aware, or must be aware, of how they all individually do their best work. How do they communicate? How do they set themselves up to be productive? Where do they get their best ideas? How do they like to receive feedback? And we can get this kind of information from things like personality tests or personality assessments, but I actually prefer, I wouldn't say prefer, personality assessments have their place. I actually really like when we take teams through self-reflection exercises. Always sometimes slightly amazed that team members haven't done this before, and they haven't taken the time to kind of reflect on what they really need to do their best work. So that's the first piece, giving time to reflect. Again, something that I see is that we don't really have permission on work time to take time out to reflect. It's often something that we see that we do on our individual time, our kind of time away from work. So building in that kind of permission to take time to reflect and really sort of understand on an individual basis how you get your work done, how you get your work, how you communicate with others, how you like to communicate, how you like to receive feedback, etc. And then the second piece is having those conversations across the team, ensuring that everybody is aware of the different working styles, and you kind of negotiate and create ways of working within reason, and that ensure that everybody has the space to work in the way that is best for them. So that's the cohesion piece. The third piece is communication. And this kind of comes down to really everything that we've been speaking about. It's largely, but not exclusively, how we run our meetings. And as I mentioned, this is not about running workshops all the time, but we can definitely take some inspiration from workshops in perhaps some of the workshop exercises that we run and the way that we structure our workshops to craft better meetings, to make sure that they're more interactive, they allow for creativity, they allow for people to contribute, they're more balanced, and we make progress. Another piece on this as well is kind of using those facilitation skills and encouraging all team members to learn facilitation skills, so that anybody on the team can kind of lead those more collaborative, interactive meetings. And the fourth piece is design and being intentional about how teams work together, or how you work together as a team. And this is about co-creating routines and rituals. And I kind of talk about routines and rituals over team building. I think that, when we think about classic team building, we think about time away from the office, or dedicated time to build connection as a team. And I think the way that the modern workplace is now, and how much we need collaboration, actually we need to be building our teams as we're working together, not seeing it as a kind of separate event. So the way to do that is to work together as a team to co-create, as I say, systems, processes, routines, and rituals that keep us connected. What is it that we need to design? How can we be intentional about ensuring that we stay cohesive, ensuring that we stay aligned, based on the goals that we need to achieve? What can we put in place? What can we set up to give ourselves a higher chance of achieving those goals? And how do we design those into the way that we work? And then the final piece is change. And essentially this is about continuing to have these conversations, continuous improvement, continuing to take stock of what's happening around us in the environment, and assess and review and reflect on whether the culture that you have designed or we have designed as a team is relevant for what is happening around us and the work that we need to do. Are we displaying productive team habits as a team? Is the way that we naturally communicate in service of collaboration, or is it causing challenges? And the ability to kind of change that behaviour, shift towards more positive habits, is this piece. So having regular conversations about how you're working, about team habits, and really building that muscle, say for those facilitated conversations, those workshop type conversations, the ability to use design thinking to create new ways of working, and that regular habit of reflection. So that's the 5-pillar framework. As I said, lots more information about that in the book. And the key here is that those pillars, it's not a step-by-step, but each of those areas requires workshop type conversations or workshop type formats to work a team through that, into that kind of essence of co-creation. So back to the original question, how can we use workshops and facilitation to transform the world of work? As I mentioned, what we see in workshops, both from how a facilitator creates that environment to how the participants are interacting with each other and with the material, what we see there is actually how we want to be working every day. So how can we take those principles into our everyday? And for me, this can change the way that we work on a day-to-day basis and make our days much more pleasant and productive. But I thought that there's kind of a potential for the future. If we're creating environments through the principles and practices of workshops that are more collaborative, that do enable everyone individually to do their best work, create more autonomy, create more transparency, create more connection, we're going to attract and retain talent by having more conversations about how people work differently and being able to negotiate across those differences and handle conflict in a more productive way. We're creating more inclusive and diverse workplaces by being intentional about how we work together, creating and designing routines and rituals that support productivity, support creativity. We're actually supporting good mental health and well-being. We're designing well-being into our work. And by using the skills of facilitation for leaders and team members alike, we're looking at new ways of organising and leading our teams and our organisations. So that's it from me. That's kind of a very whistle-stop tour through some of the kind of main principles and concepts of workshop culture. A small gift, if you would like to buy a copy, I'll obviously be very, very grateful. And if you buy it directly from my publisher, and if you just enter this code WRKCULT30 on the page to buy workshop culture, then you'll get a 30% discount. And as I mentioned, any comments or feedback, then please do post on LinkedIn as well. That's it. I'm done, Sathpal.
That was great. Really good opener. Great scene set. I think you've left me quite a few things to think about there. All right, folks, we're going to move into a bit of a chat now between Alison and I. What I think we'll try to do. Do you want to stop your screen share, Alison? That's cool.
I will, yeah.
I think I'm going to try to do here. If we could ask everybody to, because we're not obviously not in a sort of webinar mode, if we can ask everybody to just switch their cameras off for the next bit, just as a little bit of focus on Alison and I think that would be quite good. So if you don't mind doing that, and then we'll have a bit of a chat, and then we'll open up to yourself. So quite keen to see what we didn't cover off, and then what else you might want to do, because it's a big topic. There's lots of great things to cover. There's lots you've already shared, so much stuff that we could probably take hours delving into it, really, and hours we don't have. One of the things before we even get into it, I was just staggered by was you had a slide where I think it said like 70% of meetings are ineffective. What's the origin of that stat?
And that comes from a report from Asana. The thing is that, that's one report that I pulled out. There are so many reports and research studies around the ineffectiveness of meetings across organisations. There's one that I remember, a stat that I used to use, saying that, I think this stat is from 1988, bizarrely, that 35 million or something like that is wasted on meetings yearly. And I think, do you remember the Tool Doodle? I don't know if it exists anymore. It does exist. Yeah, Doodle. They did a report, I think, in 2019, which updated that stat. Which, I mean, it was just phenomenal. The billions of pounds that are wasted on unproductive meetings every year. And I mean, anecdotally as well, I think we've all got experience of attending meetings where we kind of wish we hadn't. It was just a time suck, a waste of our day. And I think for me, it's almost like such a quick fix. There's all, there's another, I didn't put it in this talk actually, but there's a bit of research that shows that people's experience of meetings can have a direct impact on their experience of work. So if we are in back-to-back meetings, which some of us do experience, and each of those meetings are unproductive or feel like a waste of time, or we weren't able to contribute, that's our experience of work. And if we take it back the other way, we can actually, with some of the very practical things that we know about running kind of more collaborative sessions, we can make those meetings better. And therefore, if we can make our meetings better, then we can improve our experience of work.
No, I think just one of the things I was reflecting there when you were talking is, so I'm one of these people who does work in an environment where I'm often in back-to-back meetings, and that can literally last for the majority of my day. And you're context switching a lot as well, and many of us are. But if you go to one meeting and it's a particularly, you have a particularly bad experience, or the meeting's not good for whatever reason, that can then kind of have a bit of a knock-on effect to, the mindset that you take into, how you show up for the next meeting, frankly, and I
Absolutely.
think that can dictate your day. So that's quite interesting. So one of the things I was keen to start with really is, you set the scene really well around, what this stuff really means, what the workshop culture stuff's about, what's kind of driving it. One of the things I thought would be really good to kind of start with is, talked a lot about facilitation, obviously, you fully expected that you would. And many, in our community are, they're practitioners, they're coaches, they're, facilitating and doing a lot of it. And many of us have run workshops. But from your experiences, and obviously you've got extensive experience in facilitation, what do you think a good facilitator is really focusing on and thinking about when they're going to be running a great workshop? What were your top maybe 3 or 4 things absolutely a great facilitator should be focused on?
Yeah, I mean, there's loads. I would say that when we think about kind of workshop facilitation, our mind naturally goes to the day. But I mean, we had this conversation before. We know that as a facilitator, it's not just, our work doesn't start on the day. It starts way before that when we're preparing. And I'd say that's kind of one of my top things. I think there's a misconception that facilitators just turn up and kind of do their thing, when actually we really have put a lot of work into designing a process that is going to take a team through a journey. So I say that's the first thing, that really like have your own process for preparation, and make sure that you kind of turn up. And then of course, one of the things that we know as facilitators, that we need to be able to go with the flow on the day. So we may have spent lots of time preparing, but we know that's going to change. I mean, even very recent workshops that I've run, I was thinking about the one last week. I kind of had this plan, and I had to shift and change it halfway through. So we need that flexibility. But then there are certain characteristics of a facilitator that, these are the things that I'm kind of digging into when I think about how leaders can use facilitation to create those environments. This asking good questions, being curious. Facilitator isn't really there to be a process facilitator isn't there to be a content expert. They're there to guide the team through a process. So they're not contributing any ideas or content. And they're asking the right questions to help the team do that. And they're providing the kind of, as I said, the container or the structure. And I think that's something that can be quite difficult for leaders sometimes, not thinking that they need to have the answer. They're there to ask questions instead. So I think that's another thing, being able to ask the questions that encourage people to speak up. And then there's all the other things of creating that environment for psychological safety. How do you create the space where people do feel happy to speak up and to be honest? How do you create a space for productive conflict? Like, we don't want a team to just be harmonious all the time. That's a misconception about collaboration. The whole point of collaboration is that we have diverse viewpoints and diverse personalities, and we use that to really build on the creative tensions that brings. That's where the magic happens, right? So being able to manage that. What else in terms of, I mean, there's so much. There's the asking, there's listening. I think another thing as well is that synthesis. I mean, this is sort of one of the important roles of a facilitator, is that ability to be sort of just one step removed from what the team is doing. So you kind of have that overview. You can start to spot patterns between what people are saying. Like, when people feel that they might be in conflict, actually you're the one that's able to spot, or actually no, you're kind of saying the same thing but just differently. You both actually agree with each other. You're spotting the connections between ideas, and you can kind of pull ideas together quickly, almost kind of making a little bit of order out of chaos. But there's loads. There's a sort of a big list. And I think the other thing about facilitation, particularly when we're looking at in a workshop culture, it takes a sense of vulnerability as well, which again I think is sometimes quite challenging for leaders. That vulnerability in kind of saying, oh, this is the plan that I had, but actually, you know, I have to change. Or that ability to say, look, I don't know the answer. Let's kind of work it out together.
I was fascinated when you were talking about the healthy tension bit, because I like that as a concept, but I think it's quite a hard thing, you know, sometimes to bring to life, you know, because tension has certain connotations. So you mentioned it in the introduction, and you just said it again there. So have you? So there must be times where, you know, you've run a workshop and, you know, it's really not going according to plan. And this isn't a healthy tension thing. I'm going to come back to that. But in a scenario where it really wasn't going the way you were hoping it was going to go, and you've probably got a few examples from your own experiences. I mean, what would your tips be for others when that's not happening? And have you got a good example of when it did happen, and what you did to kind of, you know, steer things back on course?
Gosh, I mean, I'm thinking about, I don't know if this is going to answer your question, but I'm thinking about a very recent example where we were in a group. I mean, I was kind of a semi-facilitator in this session, but I could see a tension rising between almost like two sides of the team. One side of the team was very kind of creative and experimental and kind of liked to go with the flow and loved kind of creative chaos. And the other side of the team were very much about implementation and execution. And I could see the frustration rising on either side. And I kind of, I pointed it out. I kind of called it out, and I just said, look, this side of the team sees this, and this side of the team sees that, the sort of the creative chaos, and this side of the team sees the execution. And just by calling it out, the team were able to say, actually, we need both of those things. We need both of those things to survive. So I think that, or to be successful. So I think when it comes to that kind of healthy tension, and this is probably one of the sort of classic reasons behind when you do sort of insights or DISC or Myers-Briggs, and those personality tests, is to show that you need lots of different types of personalities on a team to survive, or to succeed. I keep on saying survive, to succeed. But the very nature of those differences can be what causes tension. So your role is to try and turn that into healthy tension rather than destructive tension.
Yeah, no, you see it. I think the way you described it there, that I think many of us can probably relate to that, where you've got groups of folk who like the creative space. If that's created well, they can thrive in that, generate lots of ideas and have great sort of collaborative conversations. And others are just interested in the execution and want to cut to the chase a little bit. So they want to kind of short circuit the sort of discovery bit of it. I think it's not unusual, actually. No, that's good. That's really, really good. So when you think about what you were describing, so great workshops. We all know what those feel like, and the feeling we get when we leave. And you've been talking a lot, and your book talks a lot about the workshop culture, which is how can you extend that beyond that to just be sort of the norm. But what does that sort of transition look like? I mean, how do you what is that? How do you make that happen? What are the sorts of, baby steps you would take to try to, I guess, nurture that going beyond this, one-time event, as you said, which isn't how it should be viewed,
Yeah.
into this, this is just the way it feels all the time, and it's a creative sort of space. What does that
Mm.
transition journey look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with that. It does start with that one-time event. And I mean, I think not so much now, but definitely when I started facilitating, I was often the first person to introduce a team to that format and that way of working. So I'd get comments like, this workshop was great. We got more done in a day than we have done in the last 6 weeks of discussion. And that's that's the feeling that you want to get. You want to go in and you want to show that team a new way that there is a different way of doing things. A different way is possible. So sort of running that first workshop where they experience that new way of working, and then the role of the facilitator is to like continue that, not just leave it at the end of the workshop, but make sure that the actions are integrated into the day to day. So whether that's some kind of accountability or coaching to make sure that the workshop isn't just a workshop, it is contributing to what they're doing in the business. And then, once you've got that permission, once people see that this is a great way of working, then you've got permission to do that more regularly. So this is what happened with me when I started to discover workshop culture, right? I went into talk about this case study in the book. I went into this organization. It was a professional services firm, and they'd never ever worked this way before. I did this workshop and they were like, wow, this is amazing. We've got so much done. Come in and do another workshop for us. And then that kind of led to another workshop. So they started to like trust that process of working in that way. And it got to the stage where they were starting to integrate some of the things that I was doing in the workshops with them into their own meetings. And that's where we're starting to move towards a workshop culture. So it's kind of, this is a linear process. And I've kind of described this in the book as sort of a very tidy process. It's not often like this, but start with the one-off workshop, make sure it leads into something, get permission to do kind of more workshop-like sessions. And then when you're doing the more like workshop-like sessions, eventually that will lead into the team starting to take some of those tools themselves and using them and sort of running with them. And
Yes.
that's where I would say it's kind of a workshop culture.
Yeah. But I guess it's a bit like, maybe doing it small scale. That was in one of your, your foundation steps, and showing others what good looks like.
Yeah.
If you can see what good looks like, and they really buy into it, they can see the longer term benefits of it. They kind of want to do more. And of course, there's many in our community who are, the transformation leads and doing, the agile transformations, various complex, very behavioral, change focus sort of initiatives like that. And this is kind of very much in that kind of sphere. In your experience of it, what are some of the typical barriers you've seen where it's kind of not kind of landing the way you would hope? What do you typically see, and what do you recommend be the ways that you overcome it, and how have you found yourself overcoming it over your years of?
Yeah, I mean, I think patience is definitely a big one. Sometimes it takes a while for I'm just thinking of sort of some teams that I've worked with in the past, and I sort of don't make a secret of saying that probably one of the first things that you could do to make an impact is to shift the way that you run your meetings. But sometimes it takes a while for the leader to build up confidence to use facilitation techniques in their meetings. There's somehow like a barrier between seeing me do it and being able to do it themselves, which is natural, right? Because they might it's a skill that they might need to develop. So I think that's one of them, sort of low confidence in facilitation. I think we spoke about it just now as well. It was like trying to do too much too soon, going too hard too soon. And what that happens is like when you're going through, everyone on the call know this, like the behavioral change piece is that if you try to do too much at the same time, first of all, you're not able to keep to all of those commitments, but you burn out. You burn out because you're just trying to do, trying to change too many layers at the same time. And we, as humans, we just don't have that capacity. So helping teams to realize that that small micro action that might seem really insignificant today, doing it consistently over time is going to make a difference, and getting them to kind of stick with that, because sometimes the micro action seems so small. It's like, really, is this going to make a difference? And it's like, no, that's how you change behavior. You start with something tiny and you build that kind of momentum up. And then I think connected to that is kind of giving up too quickly. This is hard. It's not an easy thing to, like, any kind of human behavior is challenging. And if you are not, I mean, I talk about this in the book. It's like, you know, if you're going to embark on this journey, you've taken on the role of a change agent. And if you've taken on the role of a change agent, then you really kind of need to understand that changing human behavior is quite difficult, and it's messy, and it's complex, and you kind of need to stick with it for a while to see the results.
So have you ever saw any like recurring themes or patterns? So what I mean by that is, are there certain maybe types of organizations or certain sectors where, you know, the transition is easier, or you know, more difficult, or can't be done at all, or is done more easily? I mean, is there anything like that that's come up in your experiences?
You know, I don't think there's a pattern. I honestly don't think there's a pattern, because I've done this with, you know, organizations or teams that I would consider creative, and it's been more challenging. And then I've done, you know, some of this work with organizations or teams that I would consider perhaps more traditional or more formal, and the changes come more quickly. So I don't think there's really kind of a pattern or a theme. I think one thing that I possibly would say is that the more senior in an organization you get, the more challenging change I think probably is with this kind of stuff, because it's just so hard to break away from kind of what got you to success, and kind of letting go of some of those kind of old habits and those preconceptions. So yeah.
So in my head, I was thinking, you know, the difference between perhaps, you know, a traditional, you know, global corporate of some description versus, you know, a lean startup versus, you
Yeah.
know, a public sector, you know, agency versus, you know, perhaps a charity, you know, that type of thing.
I mean, it's interesting because, you know, I'm sort of looking back on some of my projects, and I would say, bizarrely, I mean, there isn't a pattern, but with the more corporate organizations, I think the initial change feels a lot more impactful because they are not used to working in this way. So if I sort of work in a creative organization, they've probably, you know, done the post-it notes and the workshops and the brainstorming. So it's not new to them. Whereas, you know, say even the first organization where I started to really discover workshop culture, it was completely, you know, I'll talk about, as I talk about in the book, it was like a long conference table, 20 people sitting around the conference table. It was like, you know, the head of the table, you know, the leader of the organization sitting at the head, and literally no one spoke. So for me to come in and bring the post-it notes and the Sharpies, they're like, what is this? What is this woman doing with us? You know, it's just, yeah. So I think the change is a lot more, the transformation is more, is stronger with those kinds of organizations that have never experienced it before. It's more stark, I'd say, yeah.
And I guess that takes us back to what we talked about earlier. We think about the, you know, good facilitation and the upfront preparation work that goes into it, trying to help, you know, those who are going to be participants in a workshop to at least have some kind of idea of what to expect, or, you know, what's expected of them, what's it going to feel like. And I think that's really important. So when this workshop culture stuff really does embed and it's gone well, and, you know, organizations have seen the benefits, you know, how's it going to feel different? Have you seen very obvious examples or had feedback, I guess, more likely qualitative, I guess, than quantitative?
Yeah. I mean, it can be
like
quantitative. I mean, at Bracket, we have a diagnostic that, you know, where it makes sense, we work with teams, we do a diagnostic at the start of engagements, and then we repeat it at the end. And what we've seen with a couple of, you know, a few of the teams that we've worked with is that typically over about a 6-month period, we see a 10% improvement in team culture. I mean, it's not enough to kind of say that as a big thing, but there's definitely some kind of pattern there. There is a shift there. So, you know, we see more people speaking up, more people feeling comfortable, and people being able to work through conflict easier and more quickly, you know, because people are speaking more, they're not letting things fester, more feedback, just sort of a general lightness in the team, because people are feeling more creative, they're able to share their ideas more. So I think those are some of the signals that people see.
I was interested there. You touched on the quantitative, and you were talking about obviously there's a starting point, so meeting
Mm.
in organisations where they are, and then getting to a certain point. Is that akin to a sort of maturity model, or is that the wrong way of thinking about it?
I don't think it's a maturity model. It's more of a because I think with the this is all about culture. So a, t- a team a team culture will constantly shift, and we have a scale. So we do the diagnostic, right? There is a score from 0 to maybe 130 that a team can score along. But we say that these aren't categories. It's a scale that you can move up and down. Because if something changes in your team and you're not able to kind of recalibrate and shift your culture accordingly, then you're going to kind of shift down that scale. But again, if you're kind of working on this as a team, continuing to work on it, then you're going to sustain your high level, or you're going to move upwards. So I think that idea that a team culture is dynamic, and just because you might be high performing right now doesn't mean you always will be, because something around you might change, which forces you to, might increase conflict in your team, or might have an impact on your performance. And therefore you need to then have those conversations about culture again to kind of keep it up at that level. So yeah, it's less of a maturity and more of a, just a snapshot of where you are right now.
Okay, no, that's great. That's good. Awesome. No, I really enjoyed that. Learned a few more, and I'll keep delving into the book. I'd like to bring everybody back in now, if that's okay. And great to hear what others are thinking. What else did we not cover? Where do your curiosities lie around this stuff? So feel free to bring bring your camera back, I guess, to come on screen, I guess is probably the phrase I'm looking for. And yeah, let's see what everybody else is thinking. And any other
There's a
thoughts?
question from
Questions?
Patrick in the there's a question from
I'm just
Patrick
flicking
in
through it.
the
Oh,
chat
there we are.
box.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have you used
Um,
liberating structures, and if so, would you please describe your experiences?
Thanks,
Great.
Patrick. I haven't used all of them. The one that I really love actually is Troika Consulting. I use that quite frequently, and variations of that as well. So yeah, I think liberating structure, anything that provides tools, kind of step-by-step tools for leaders to use, and makes it safe to kind of try these things, I think are great. So yeah, I love liberating structures.
Cool. Thanks.
Have you used it, Patrick?
Yeah, I've have in different contexts, and I love the way it maximizes participation. It really takes care of, like, I enjoy your presentation very much, by the way, and I'm completely on board with your points and your perspective. And what made me think of liberating structures was what you talked about, because all the different qualities that you want to build into a team, from my experience anyway, get expressed through liberating structures in a very economical way, because you have to design a workshop. I mean, you always tweak these structures; they're not in stone, but you just, like, they're ready-made. You throw them in there, and if you make it part of the ongoing routine of the of the organization, then you're building that collaborative culture of psychological safety and respecting other people's opinions, and collaborating. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Alison, appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Super. Any other questions, folks? There's plenty of time, so have fun. Yeah. Excellent. Open it up to the floor again. Yeah, we've got 20 minutes or so. So, what else is on people's minds? What else would you like to cover? Please do take advantage of Alison being here and sharing our extensive experiences in the world of facilitation and workshop design, and just helping organisations to really embrace that, to be more creative. So, yeah,
is my audio coming in okay?
Yeah, please.
Great. I'll start with my first question, and let somebody else go. But I'm curious. Like, there's a part of me that feels like there's some, like, deep cultural aspect of whether any organization is going to accept this in any one person's lifetime. So my question is, how would you, like, what kind of questions might you ask when you're interviewing to find out, is this an organization that might be not necessarily practicing, but open to or more likely to adopt workshop culture?
So one of the things that I would say is that workshop culture starts more at the team level. And so you might not find an organization fully adopting a workshop culture, but if you're interviewing and you want to see the attitude of your leader and the people on the team, and that will give you more of a sense. And, you know, I mean, there's also research out there from Gallup that shows that our experience of work is more influenced by our team than the wider organizational culture. We talk a lot about company culture, but actually it's the people that we interact with on a day-to-day basis that naturally has an impact on how we feel about work. And so I would be asking those questions at the team level. I think, you know, you might not see it or have evidence of it across an organization, but you want to be conscious of even whether, you know, the leader of the team is open to these different ways of working, because that's where it's going to have make the most difference for you as an individual.
So I help Donald to answer the question. Great. I've got a great one here in the chat from Bridget. When working with a team as a one-off, and that's what you were talking about earlier, what can you do? Chances of continuing collaborating if nobody's checking up? Yeah, that's a fab question.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I started to do, I mean, this is something that I did early on in my facilitation practice before Bracket was what it was now, is like I made the follow-up a non-negotiable. So, you know, again, it's almost like the awareness of a client, you know, because they're not in the process, they don't necessarily understand that you don't just turn up on the day and facilitate and then that's it. Actually, you kind of need to educate them and say, look, it's a 3-step process. It's before what happens, it's what happens on the day, and then it's what happens afterwards. And I won't leave, you know, I'm not just going to run the workshop and then go. My process has to be part of the write-up. And then so I would always think about like how you can use that part of the process, the follow-up, to encourage as much as possible the client, or facilitate the client to following up. I mean, you know, some of the other things that I'm thinking is, depending on the engagement that you have, how much of the day or the end of the day will you allocate to creating actions and commitments? You know, I'm guilty of this. Sometimes it's the last kind of 5-10 minutes of a workshop, right? And we're just like, okay, so what are we going to do next? There was one workshop that I did, which I'll always think about, because we allocated probably about an hour and a half to creating commitments, having everyone coach each other around, you know, this commitment that you've made. What's the likelihood of you keeping to it? And if you don't think you're going to keep to it, what would get in the way, and how can you, you know, we spent a very good time on really getting people into the headspace of what happens after the workshop. So those are some of the things that I would say is, you know, make sure that the write-up and the follow-up is a non-negotiable. Think about how you can integrate or, I guess, seed the idea of you need to do stuff afterwards into the design of the workshop as well, so that it becomes part of the session. It's not just a kind of 5 minutes at the end, and then nobody comes back to the notes or the post-its.
So just while I'm shifting, looking for another question or so, one of the things that I guess I was also curious about in our little chat, and I just wanted to open it up to the group, was feedback. So it's kind of a big topic. A lot of us have kind of, tried different ways to do that. What's your sort of approach to that? How do you want to know if a workshop's gone well?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought you meant feedback between participants.
No.
Just, yeah.
How do you measure that success, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, oh gosh. mean, the thing is that probably don't measure as much as I should do, because a lot of the engagements that I do at the moment are working with teams over a period of time. So that feedback is a lot more, rather than a specific form, it's much more, I guess, emergent. Always doing always do a debrief with the client. And as I say, I kind of build this into my engagements now. So where is possible, the work doesn't end at the end of the workshop. There's a write-up, there's a debrief with the client. There's also, if I can, wrangle a follow-up session with the team, whether it's like half an hour or an hour, just to kind of check in and see how they've been getting on since the workshop and respond. So I guess those are the ways, the kind of non-official ways that I collect feedback or get a sense of, has this workshop been impactful? Has it got the things done that I need to? I think one of the other things, this is kind of a bit of an odd thing to say, but one of the other things to say I'm aware of, and this has been something that I'm still struggling with, sometimes as a facilitator, coming in and supporting that process, I guess there's no sort of easy way to say this. Sometimes the teams actually don't quite like you, because you are challenging them. And the result that you've got might not feel great to the team in the moment, but it's kind of what needed to happen. So I'd be also careful about measuring feedback. How much did you like the facilitator? Because that might not be relevant in service of what the team actually needs to achieve.
Yeah, you do see that actually quite a lot in sort of feedback forums, don't you? It's like, what did you get out of was it good? Did you? Yeah, and you want feedback on the facilitation, but I guess that's an interesting dimension on it as well. It's how do you, you've got to build that rapport, don't you? You've got to build that.
You have to build a rapport,
and likability is just one of those factors, isn't it? Patrick, you've got your hand up. I think you want to come in here. Can't wait to hear what you're going to say.
Well, yeah, I love that you're even broaching that subject. That's not what my question was for, but I just love the broaching of it, because it's kind of touchy and involves egos and one's own validation, self-worth. So it's like a lot of stuff gets thrown into the barbecue sauce, as it were.
Yeah.
My question, because you mentioned Alison, and I definitely agree, is that implementing change at the team level is a good unit to start with. And I was curious about your experience and lessons you've learned, or stories you have about how the team, let's say you developed a workshop culture with that team. How do they bring it to the larger organization? What were some pathways that you saw as being effective in bringing this to the larger organization?
I mean, where the first example that comes to mind is actually where I was working with a leadership team. And of course, when you kind of when you're able to make the change happen there, then it's definitely much easier to make it across the organization. And that is easier. Where I have seen it happen on sort of lower levels is not so much about, it's starting with a team, and then that team is able to implement a workshop culture across the organization. But it's in the kind of the small shifts in, if a team starts to build better relationships within the team, they're working in a more agile way, they're more creative, they're more open, that starts to have an impact on how they interact with others, because they're starting to be more satisfied in their work, more satisfied in they're turning up differently, and that starts to have a slight impact on other teams. Again, it depends on the control that the team has. They're going out and they're kind of facilitating that team, or they just got sort of a light touch point, but there's an influence there. It's kind of like, what's going on in that team over there? Let's find out a little bit more about how they're working together. But I think the easiest thing, where possible, and again, it depends on the size of the organization, right? But if you're working with the top level of an organization, then they will start to take that into the teams that they're working with, and so on.
Right. Yeah. No, that's brilliant. The leadership team definitely as a team, but higher up in the ladder to be able to implement stuff. In terms of smaller teams, I'm thinking of have you worked with Scrum teams?
I haven't, no.
Okay, because I guess why I brought it up is that Scrum Master has an accountability to bring agile approaches to the larger organization. And I know that's kind of a heavy lift at times. And so I was just wanted to know if you'd had that experience of somebody doing that successfully. So
yeah, I mean, I think just trying to think of some examples. You know, I think that there's also something around, and you know, this has happened in various places. So there's a change in the team, right, in terms of how they work together. And then there's also another level, which is where the team start to pick up on some of the facilitation. So there's the environment of a workshop culture where perhaps the leader is taking much more responsibility for the facilitation, the running sessions, running the workshops. But when that responsibility is also shared amongst the team, then there's much more possibility for impact. Because again, the more people that they're interacting with, they can go to other meetings across the organisation and say, okay, look, we can do this in a different way. Yeah, you know, I don't think any of this is, you see change happen is what I was talking about. You don't see change happen instantly. It's kind of these little ripples and these kind of little kind of instances that done consistently will compound. So yeah.
Right, like osmosis and also leading by example.
Exactly.
And then a buzz gets created. Hey, this team is really firing on all cylinders. What are they doing that's so special? And then it generates a curiosity with the rest of the organization.
Yeah, some of the best sessions I've run, or the ones that have made me smile, is at the end where you can kind of see, you know, I've got a couple of examples of this where people have said, okay, we're going to run that meeting. What would Alison do? Like kind of trying to tap into the facilitation style, right? Or, you know, I'm really excited by this. I want to see how we can run more of our meetings like workshops. And that's where, you know, there's been a little bit of a shift, because there's a difference between kind of having this stuff done. That's not the right way of saying it. Being a participant or experiencing this stuff in a passive way, and then actually seeing or understanding the process. So it's kind of a little bit meta, right? It's like when you're in a workshop and you're a participant, you don't really know what the facilitator does. The minute you start understanding what the facilitator does, that's when there's been a bit of a shift in awareness.
Yeah. There's your validation.
Yeah, right.
Good work. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Patrick. Good stuff. I think we're getting not far off near the end. We've got a little bit of time. If there's any remaining questions from anyone that's not been covered or you'd like further clarification on, please jump in, really. Glad for you to do that. If not, I'll start to wrap up. It's been a great session and lots of great questions. I think that's all a lot to think about and to build on, and I'm sure others will pick up a copy of your book. So there's lots of great stuff in there to use to not just better improve facilitation or how we run workshops, but as you're really trying to say, Alison, how we kind of really have that sort of embedding across an organisation, creating sort of environments where people are communicating well and collaborating and co-creating and all these good things and driving towards the business outcomes. I guess that's probably my final thing, because that's something that comes up a lot, certainly in a lot of my initiatives, is really linking these things back to, you know, why you doing certain things and what are the sort of business outcomes. Do you find you're trying to build that into some of your workshops? Is that part of the conversation? I mean, what's your sort of experience and view on that?
In terms of?
So like when you're trying to help teams run workshops and you're kind of facilitating them, etc., how much of the conversation is around a larger, more sort of holistic kind of picture of here's sort of business outcomes that we're trying to drive to, and then does that come up much for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the center of it, really. I mean, you know, you can have these conversations about collaboration, but they become much more powerful when it's collaboration in service of a goal that you need to achieve. Because we can all kind of reel off you know, what good collaboration looks like, and, you know, what we need to do and how we need to be with each other. When you connect that need for collaboration to a bigger goal that you know that you couldn't achieve without the rest of your team members, then it makes it much more compelling to kind of stick to some of these behaviors. So yeah, that compelling reason for us working together as a team, you know, again, I talk about this in the book, is that, you know, that's why that kind of alignment piece, that thinking big picture, is so important, because collaboration isn't easy. It isn't all kind of, you know, sitting around a campfire singing Kumbaya. It's challenging. It is, you know, if we are to collaborate really well, we're going to be making use of diverse personalities and people that work differently and look differently and approach work differently, and that in itself can create tensions and conflict. And then there's all the other things that could happen that could get in the way of a team operating smoothly. There needs to be a real compelling vision for why collaboration is the right way to approach this challenge together, than not for the team to kind of stick with all of this. Otherwise, you know, what's the point?
Great. Love that. I think that's probably a perfect place to start to bring it to a close, really. If there's no other questions, absolutely. You know, why and what's it going to help you deliver in terms of, you know, great business outcomes that support whatever your organisation is trying to achieve. Well, thanks everyone. I think that was a great session. Really enjoyed it. Learned lots. Great to hear everybody's questions and perspectives, and of course, Alison, thanks to your good self for joining us and taking us through, you know, all this great work that you've been doing in this space, and I guess really whetting our appetite to hopefully go and look at how we can improve the stuff in our own organisations, how we run workshops and facilitate well, etc. So thank you again for joining us. I really enjoyed it, and great to have you here. And I'm still learning lots and getting inspiration when I'm picking up your book. So
thank you.
Continue to do that, and I hope you'll also all pick up a copy. We did share Donald shared the link to the publisher site, so you have an opportunity to pick up a copy if you want it at a generous discounted price. So please do if this work continues to be of interest to you, and I'm sure it will be. Just a couple of other updates for you all. Those of you who've been looking up us on Meetup will see that we've already got a few other sessions in the diary. We're building up the program, so Donald and I are busy working away on that behind the scenes. We've got a couple of other excellent sessions lined up for you over Q1. So our next session in February is Leaders, Believers, and Expert Deceivers. I love that. Ed Stephen Morris has written a great book with that very title. And the session's really about his experiences helping organisations really understand that there isn't a one-size-fits-all leadership approach. So I think that's a fascinating session. You know, he's a great guy. Donald and I met with him recently, so that'd be another good session for you. So do sign up for that if that's of interest to you. The numbers are growing with that one as well. And in March, we'll have Stuart Munton here. He's a good friend of mine, and he's going to be talking about AI. So we were quite interested to do an AI session, given its ubiquity and it's such a popular topic. What we didn't want to do was do AI sessions, which were like lots of other, and actually, you know, we look at, you know, culture and various other aspects of organizational sort of work evolution. So this talk is really, and I've heard the talk, is really about the role that AI can play in the way, you know, teams are configured and the dynamics in teams, and how it can really shift the way that teams look at and deliver products. So it's very relevant to the work that a lot of us are doing. It is a great talk, as I say. I've heard it before at a conference that Stuart and I both spoke at. So I'd encourage you to join us for that, because it really is a great talk. It's very eye-opening, and it's not your traditional, you know, AI is going to change the world, the robots are taking over kind of thing. It's not that sort of thing at all. So if that sounds good to you, then do please join us and look out for other sessions that we're going to be putting in over the coming weeks. The last thing I'd probably just draw your attention to is probably more for the UK-based colleagues, but you can join day 2 virtually. So next week, the Gathering, it's a UK-based 2-day conference and event targeting the sort of voluntary sector. It is happening. It's a great program. I'm supporting it this year, so I'm a panelist on day 1, but there is still opportunities to sign up. So if you are in, you know, the Scottish Central Belt and you'd be interested to join that. I think there's still spaces available in some of the sessions. Also, day 2 is virtual, so take a look. You might want to join that, but there's some really, really good stuff in there. So check it out if that's of interest to you. And we do have a couple of minutes. I don't know if anybody's got any other shout outs or anything that they'd like to draw the group's attention to that they thought might be of interest to others. You're welcome to come off mute and share that or drop it in the chat. We're always happy for folk to do that. If not, we'll call it there. It's great to be back. Great to see you all, and thoroughly enjoyed our first session of the year. So thank you for your participation, your contributions and your engagement. Enjoyed it thoroughly, and we look forward to seeing you in other sessions over the rest of the year. And thanks again, Alison, for your great session today. Thoroughly enjoyed that too. So thank you very much. And
thank you for having me.
We'll see you all again soon, hopefully. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your day wherever you happen to be in the world. Take care. Speak soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.